Start.
All right. Can everyone hear us?
Hopefully. Cool. Awesome. All right. Hey, sorry for the delay. Had some technical difficulties, which isn't surprising. It seems like that happens every day around here. Yeah, so my name's Stewart Habig, and this is Layne Farmen. We work at University of Tulsa for the athletic department as academic advisors, and we're here to talk to you about some interventions and some things that we've been doing at University of Tulsa over the last year and a half. I want to treat it kind of like a workshop setting where we're going to use our own experience as a case study so that we can kind of like point out what worked for us, what didn't work for us, maybe look for some improvements here moving forward and see what you all are doing at your institutions, and hopefully we can build something together so that we can all serve our student needs.
If I can really quickly, I posted this in the chat. It is a Google Doc that should be available for everyone to edit. In that, we'll share our screen in just a second when we get to the presentation, but in that Google Doc, there is one of our mentoring sheets that we use for students. We're going to use that mentor sheet to talk about customizing some of our approaches for your own institution. And then there's a blank one with some questions after that. And then at the very bottom of that Google Doc, if you want to click on it, there's a space for, oh, yep. Let me post it again. There's a space for posting any brainstorming, posting questions, thoughts, feedback, because we, of course, want to use this as an opportunity to also develop our own program. I'm just going to click on the Google Doc right now, make sure it is working. Yep, I see a bunch of you in there now. And we will talk about that more as we go. But in order to sort of like do the workshop part of it, that's where we can sort of be talking together about these programs.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we're going to load up our PowerPoint. Bear with us. We have not presented virtually in a while, but hopefully we'll get it here.
Yep. Cool.
Okay. Can you make it bigger?
And I will then also go to this present.
Oh, it's going to be down there. That little thing. Cool. All right. So this is our presentation, meeting student needs through mentoring and supplementary instruction initiatives. Yeah. So just a quick word about ourselves. Like I said, my name is Stewart. I came to University of Tulsa as a graduate English student about 11 years ago, which is hard to believe. And then as a graduate student here, I started tutoring student athletes in 2013, and I worked for the Office of Academic Support Services, OASIS, for 5 years as a tutor. And then after I graduated here, I taught here for a year and taught at a few high schools, and then kind of came back here full time in 2021. And I currently work as an academic advisor. I advise all Olympic sports, track and field, cross country, women's soccer, softball, and golf. And like most people in this room, I'm sure I do a little bit more for our staff. Wear a lot of hats around here. So I run the tutor program for student athletes, and then I'll talk about the mentor program that we kind of restarted here a year and a half ago. I run that as well. And then I conduct assessments for our department and communicate those to higher administration at TU.
Now, before I launch into my part, I just want to make sure, just run one more check before we do this whole presentation. If I get some feedback really quick, can everyone see that PowerPoint presentation? Get some thumbs ups. Okay, excellent. Just making sure. I didn't want to roll through that whole thing if you couldn't see it.
Yeah, that'd be kind of embarrassing for us.
Yes, it would. My name is Layne Farmen. I am finishing my PhD in English here at the University of Tulsa. I just started working in this department in student services in October on the recommendation of Stewart, but I've been working with students and teaching English, working in tutoring centers for about 10 years. Even before that, when I was a graduate student, I was teaching English too. So it's been really exciting to use some of my skills that I've developed in higher education to help student athletes. It's been very rewarding. I work with rowing and with tennis, and my main role here, in addition to that, is just assisting with the supplementary instruction program that we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, and don't worry, Layne does not blame me for talking him into this job. At least I don't know if he does. Yeah, so here's a brief outline of our workshop. today. So I'm going to give you some background information on TU and Oasis and kind of what we do and who we are and all the other things. And then we'll take you back to 2021. I know no one here wants to revisit the pandemic. I know I don't. But I think it's important to start there and then again use our own experience over the last 2 years as a case study. Just kind of look at the things that we had to encounter and the challenges and barriers to help out students that we went through, and then the things that we came up with based on our resources and capabilities to address those. And then we'll turn it over to you all, see if you have any questions, just some general discussions, if you feel like sharing your own situations with things that you're doing at your institutions. And then, yeah, hopefully we can build something together that will help us all moving forward. So just a quick brief overview. In 2020, 2021, University of Tulsa went entirely virtual, like I'm sure most schools in the country. We were virtually staffed, no classes were held in person in that academic year. And then all non-essential staff, including Oasis, was virtual. So it feels like so long ago, but it was really only 2 years. And of course, in 2020, 2021, we had a lot of delays in sports and competition seasons, especially with the American Athletic Conference. And then a lot of our spring seasons were canceled, especially for the Olympic sports and, the no NCAA men's or women's basketball tournament. And then our entire full-time staff and part-time staff and tutoring and all that stuff was conducted virtually in 2020 to 2021 and also over the summer of 2021. We use Blackboard as a learning management system, and we created a bunch of virtual rooms, and tutoring was held in those rooms, and it was very chaotic, but we made it work. And at that time, we had a director, an associate director, an assistant director, a director of learning services, and then 2 academic coordinators, and then 3 graduate assistants. And we all came back to in-person learning and staffing on August 2021. And that's right around the time that I joined. So I got to be here for all of that. And then our hours, we were open Sunday evenings, 5 to 9 p.m., Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and then Friday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. A complication for us, I don't know for you all, but the American Athletic Conference issued a directive that schools, if they had to cancel a game or postpone a game because of COVID, they had to front the cost that was incurred by postponing the game. So our athletic director mandated that all personnel who worked with student athletes had to be vaccinated through COVID, for COVID. But unfortunately, we lost a couple staff members because of that. We tried to allow some staff to work remotely, but it was kind of a disaster. Now that I'm thinking about it, everything seemed pretty chaotic, more than usual, and it was tough to keep up with everything. We had about 110 student athletes come join us in the fall of 2021, and that brought us to about 430 overall. And we noticed that, their academic performance suffered, their mental health, anxiety levels increased, and we were not, like our department was not equipped to serve their needs, and the University of Tulsa was not equipped to serve their needs. And really, like across campus, and I'm sure across most of your campuses, it was hard times with all of that. So by the end of 2021, we were down to 3 full-time staff and 2 graduate assistants. We were all in person. We had an interim director, a director of learning services, 1 academic coordinator, and the 2 GAs. But our student population didn't really change. And not only did they not change, they grew. And not only did the amount grew, but their needs increased almost exponentially. And it seemed like this chaos that we were experiencing kind of led to this sense of panic that we were unable to meet our student needs and also meet our needs as well. Our former director moved to another position across campus. So we had a lot of instability in our leadership and also the leadership across the university. So to counterbalance some of these negative trends, I took stock of kind of what we had available and came up with a plan. Because the main issues we had in the spring of 2022 were that we had a lot of students who needed help, more so than usual, I think, in terms of guidance, support academically, mental health, emotional well-being, and we had less resources to provide them with that assistance. TU also had a hiring freeze, of course, during that year. So we hired 1 full-time person in mid-January. He came to us from University of Miami. So we were able to provide a little bit more support, a little more coverage in terms of all of our sports, but we really needed people working directly more with the students, and we just didn't have that. But ironically, our budget was already approved for the fiscal year. We had just lost some people from it, so we had some extra money. And because of that, we leaned into a program that University of Tulsa started initially to help student athletes called SHAPE, and that's Student Health, Athletic Performance, and Education. And this is a research project that is run out of our psychology department. They have a grant from the NCAA, and we also have a federal grant that helps them do this. And we have a graduate assistant that is paid for by SHAPE that works with student athletes on their mental health. And so since we already had this program, I came up with a program called Shape Up. I know, like, I'm not a huge fan of acronyms, but it seems like we live in those in higher education. And with Shape Up, we wanted to focus more on our at-risk student population, and we categorize them as student athletes with a previous term GPA of less than 2.0, a cumulative GPA less than 2.2, if students were academically ineligible for the current term, or if they were otherwise flagged or discussed by their academic coordinator, we put them in this program. And the program is pretty basic. Students were required to attend a series of supplementary workshops, and I know Layne's going to talk about those more in a minute. And they focused on things like time management, stress and anxiety, finals prep, mental health, emotional well-being, things like that. And we also required them to attend regular mentor sessions either once or twice a week. And these sessions lasted about an hour. And the sessions would focus on scheduling, time management, goal setting, stuff like that. We would do a modular approach to scheduling their day or their week. The biggest thing, though, like with the mentoring program, is that we wanted these students to know that there was someone here who cared about them, who was invested in their success, and someone here that was not in a position of authority, like a coach or a teacher or even us, that wanted to be here for them, someone to listen, someone to, again, like advocate for them or on their behalf. In addition to all this, like the student athletes in Shape Up continued their regular relationships and meetings with their coordinators, and we kind of just went from there. So the plan was there, we just had to staff it. You know, like TU does not have a very big enrollment. We're a small school, you know, 2,600 undergraduate students, 1,100 graduate and law students, but we have 17 sports and 430-ish student athletes. And then to top it all off, we had a new president, Brad Carson. We had the hiring freeze. So we were kind of low on resources. So what I did is I leveraged my connections outside of campus to bring some people in. And I got an approval to hire an intern instead of a graduate assistant because we had the money for that. And then they were able to help out with scheduling all these sessions and also provide night coverage because, you know, we only had 3 full-time people here for most of the year, which meant that one of us had to be here from 8 to 9, and long days. Found a few candidates for that job. So we hired one to provide night coverage and schedule the tutor mentor sessions. It's kind of like an assistant tutor coordinator. And I reached out to a bunch of former tutors that had graduated to see if they'd come back to be a mentor for us in the Shape Up program, talked to former student athletes, and we ended up hiring 4. One was a former colleague of mine that was in between teaching jobs at high schools. One was a community member that wanted a full-time position, but also really wanted to work in education with students. So they were a great fit. One was a recent graduate student and wanted to come back and was interested in this line of business. Not sure why, but you know, we got them. And then one was a post-grad student who was pursuing a 2-year physical therapy certification. So we had 4 mentors in the Shape Up program, and they started working with the coordinators. And in the spring of 2022, we had 55 students in the Shape Up program. Out of those 55, 7 left over the course of the semester for various reasons. We had a couple get drafted by the NFL, so that's good. But then we had a few who transferred to different schools because of mental health reasons, and then this just wasn't a good fit for them. So 48 finished the semester as an enrolled student athlete. And of those 48, 90% improved their academic performance. We measured that in terms of we had a mental wellness survey, and then also their GPAs. Their average outcome was almost a full point improvement over their previous term GPA. And this is largely because of mentoring sessions that were held once or twice a week for an hour. The mentors were trained by me to follow a loose set of guidelines that really centered around understanding, empathy, and goal setting. And we have some time management worksheets that we can share with you, but really it was more of like a holistic approach. Like, what do you want to do? How can we get you there to do it? Each student was assigned a folder. We have a workspace, it's not very big, but we do have a common workspace. So each student had a folder with the name on it. The mentor would fill out the chart, put the chart in the folder, and then the folder could then be accessed by the academic coordinator to prepare us for our normal sessions with the student. I checked in with each mentor individually throughout the semester, made myself available for coaching sessions. But again, like the common theme here was so that the mentor let the student know there was someone here to help and support them. Again, because like mentors and tutors, I think, are in this position of liminality where they're not quite an authority figure and they're also not quite like a peer. There's someone who can help and bridge those two worlds. So like I said, the results were mixed. Like the student outcomes are great, but the Shape Up program and the mentoring aspect of it wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be. For example, no one really looked at the folders throughout the course of the semester. I know we were all kind of overworked and a little burned out, but by the end of the term, the rest of the staff was just asking that the mentors file a report through grades first, which we use to schedule tutoring sessions anyway. So the folders kind of became antiquated and irrelevant. But we really focused on the student outcomes. And out of the 48 students who finished the semester, only one saw their academic performance decrease. And I think the highest improvement was 1.9 points towards their GPA. And all students who were in the Shape Up program finished it eligible to compete for the following semester. So that was great. Improvements to the summer 22 term included shorter sessions based on mentor and student feedback. So we shortened those up from an hour to a half hour. And we didn't do folders for the summer. It's hard to gather data for the summer just because of students who were here and not here. But for the fall 2022 term, we continued the program. We had 22 students in Shape Up that fit those metrics about term and cumulative GPA. And then we added 15 or 20 more in the mentoring program. The hiring freeze also lifted. So we got to hire one more full-time person who's Layne. So he joined in October. And then we also started a legacy mentor program where I recruited former student athletes to come and help out, and they worked with students as well. So student athletes were given 2 30-minute sessions per week. And out of the 27 students in Shape Up, 21 saw their grades improve by an average of 0.67 grade points. So good student outcome, not as good as the first one in the spring, but still pretty good. 3 saw their grades decline and 2 stayed the same. But all the students who saw mentors outside of Shape Up saw their academic performance improve and their eligibility remained intact. So we had a lot of success and we changed it slightly heading into the spring. So now we have 33 students in Shape Up. We don't have final grades yet. Those aren't due for another week and a half. So I can't tell you what the academic performance is or how it improved. But the program grew in terms of the mentoring. We had several students request mentors that kind of graduated out of Shape Up. They still wanted the mentor to help with time management. They found that it reduced their anxiety so they could plan out everything from like morning lift all the way through evening study time and even meal times. We have 8 mentors now, and they serve a total of 67 students. And we switched to a grow methodology, and we have the worksheet posted in the chat on the Google Documents. But really what we do is we set a goal with our student athletes, and it can be anything from I want to pass this exam to I want to finish this paper to I want to study for 5 hours this week to like I want to make sure I eat 3 meals a day, or I want to make sure that, you know, I play 45 minutes in my soccer game later this week. And then we'll talk about the realities surrounding that goal, you know, what kind of barriers exist, which would be the obstacles or the O in the grow methodology. And then W is the way forward. We had the mentors fill a grow worksheet out for each session. And then instead of collecting them with a hard copy, we had the intern who helps out with scheduling mentor and tutor sessions scan them in, and then he distributes them to all full-time staff at the end of every day. So we are able to look at a PDF of the mentoring feedback sheet, and then we can use that in our regular sessions with our students. Or if we notice something happening, we can reach out to that student directly, and again, just provide positive reinforcement and things like that. And now we're kind of like wondering where to go from here in terms of the Shape Up program. And that's going to be something that we discuss more after Layne talks about his supplementary instruction program.
All right. Before I jump into that, I'm going to just take a quick break from this presentation and look at the Zoom link. Okay. I was just seeing if there was any questions in the chat. Looks like there are not, which is fine. We will take questions, of course, at the very end. All right. And if you want to put questions there now, we'll address them when we're done too. We're going to shift to supplementary instruction, which is a further program that we started when I got the job here. I actually started doing this a little bit when I was a tutor. Stewart kind of had some ideas about supplementary instruction. Basically, what supplementary instruction is instead of one-off tutoring sessions with students, a staff member, in this case me in our department, will actually host a workshop around a specific section of a class. The staff member or me, I work with a professor on this class, and the professor will open up the Harvey or Blackboard or whatever software for me to access this course, so that I can host weekly workshops to basically teach in a supplementary capacity multiple students at the same time. So instead of a one-off tutoring session, if they're, rather than seeing, you know, okay, this student is struggling with this class, so we're going to schedule a one-off tutoring session with it. The idea for this is to hit as many students as possible by actually focusing on a course that a lot of our athletes are in, that athletes have historically struggled in. So the way that we start this up, the way that we actually look at this at the beginning of the semester is, first we have to begin with departments our office has existing working relationships with. Because one of the core principles and core kind of values of this program is the relationship between a faculty member and a staff member here, it's built from that foundation. We need, for this program to work, access to this course on Harvey, Blackboard, etc., so that I can keep up with the assignments, see what's due, watch lectures if they're posted online. And so to that effect, it was really beneficial for us to begin with the departments that we already knew faculty members in. In our case, this is kind of one of those customizable things that if you wanted to think about incorporating a supplementary instruction program in your own institution, you might think or brainstorm at this point, what departments do our office already have existing professional relationships with where we could start doing something like this? There's a lot of reasons for that. One is, you know, we want to be careful and we want to be sensitive to the way that we discuss things with professors. We don't want to, you know, I wouldn't want to send an email to a professor and say, hey, 8 of our students failed your class last semester. What's going on, basically, you know? So because of that, we wanted to start with relationships that were already built. In our case, in our specific case at TU, Stewart got his doctorate here from the English department. So did I. We also have worked closely just in our own, academic achievement. We've worked with faculty members in media studies. So we started with media studies and with English because we already had existing relationships with those faculty members. We sat down and had coffee with faculty members in those departments. We kind of proposed this. We outlined the plan for how we were going to run these workshops, and the faculty members were enthusiastic about it and open to kind of working in tandem with us to help our students succeed.
Department chairs too.
And department chairs as well. We are working on expanding this now that we have success with, and I'll talk about the results a little bit more later, but now that we have some more data to support this, I think it's going to be an easier sell for other departments that we maybe don't already have existing relationships with across campus. And it'll just help us kind of forge those connections in other departments across campus, which ultimately will be much better for our students. I go and pull some reports based on historic grades of our students and just see, I literally see, okay, 8 students failed this class, and I come up with a list. You know, here's the top 5 classes where we had students have difficulty with. And that's how we target the classes. So the first semester, and I'll go over this in a second, but the first semester I ran a workshop on Intro to Media Studies. And then that was in spring 2023 and or sorry, fall 2022. And then for this semester, I ran 2 workshops, one for English 1033, which is exposition and argument, and one on media history. We also expanded to include a section on geology, and we used a graduate student in geology to do that. So really we had 3 workshops going this week. This is another customizable aspect of this, is that we are utilizing staff members here in our office that have teaching or subject-based qualifications. Both Stewart and I have advanced degrees in the humanities, and so we have both taught, so we are equipped to run these workshops in humanities-based classes. Some of our other staff members might be equipped to run these workshops for classes in business administration or whatever their degree is in. And now that that's how it was set up, and we can talk about any of these aspects at the end too if you have questions, but this is hitting the road. This is actually what I would do on a weekly basis. I would follow along with the course material for the media studies class. Fortunately, he posts his lectures online, so I would watch at least one a week. And I kind of let the professor take the lead on how much we wanted to meet, what we wanted to discuss. If the professor was particularly like if they were concerned that one lecture or one kind of unit was going to be difficult for students, the professor in media studies would contact me and we would sit down for coffee, and he would basically just tell me exactly what to target in this supplementary instruction workshop. Really quick, the workshop ran for 2 hours once a week. And we also I worked with Stewart and the tutoring coordinators to kind of figure out what time would work with the most student athletes that were in those sections. And then if students start struggling in the class, I can utilize the other success coaches and say, I think that this student needs to be attending this workshop. And then depending on, how that student is doing in the class, they could be required, or their coaches could expect them to be there, or it could be up to the student. I highlighted areas of student need or commonly overlooked course material. In the case of humanities sections, that has to do with readings. So the way that I focused my workshops is I did the readings that were on the syllabus that maybe the professor just expected students to read. I took notes on all of the readings for media history, and then I synthesized that material, and I ran my workshop by going over the notes that I took, the important quotes from those readings, because I have found that that is a commonly overlooked piece of humanities courses for students, is that when the reading is required on the syllabus and it's there on Harvey, they still kind of want to rely on the lectures to get the material rather than doing the readings. So I targeted that as an area to focus on, and that is basically how I ran the workshops. I also want to note that even though the workshops took place during a specific time, it's also important that I'm available outside of that set time to work with these students in the workshop. As you know, student athlete schedules are all over the place. Sometimes they can't make the session. So I made sure that I was available to them at other times and made one-on-one appointments with them outside of the workshop. And I think that, in our field of work, just every program that we have it's a benefit to include this, flexibility to do that. So destination, here's some results. And here's just kind of how things went. In fall 2022, I ran the one workshop for Intro to Media Studies. 9 students attended the workshop with varying consistency. Of the 9, 4 were there every single week. 2 attended about 75%, 2 attended about half, and 1 only attended a couple of times. I have a breakdown of what students from what sports attended as well. In spring 2023, we expanded to 2 workshops. Really, it's 3, but I ran 2 of them: exposition, argument, and media history. 16 students attended. And I added up the amount of sessions that they attended just to kind of crunch the numbers there to think about what we would have had to do, with a tutoring program to make this happen. So with those students in the sessions that they attended, that was roughly 57 hours of instruction. It really could have been more. So that's 57 one-off sessions with a tutor that it would have taken to basically do what we did with a supplementary instruction program. Anecdotal data from the professors of record have indicated that what's important is actually the amount of sessions attended by these students. So when I sent these numbers to professors, the professors that I've been working with, that I've been collaborating with, and sent them the data, they said, wow, what really sticks out about this is that the students that work with you a few times consistently had, dramatic improvements in their student outcomes and meeting student outcomes throughout the semester. But the students that only attended maybe 1 or 2 times, we really didn't see a change in that at all. And so that was encouraging data to suggest that time in these workshops across the semester can be, the most important factor and the most important help to students to meet their outcomes. One thing I want to note too is that, through these programs, we're also improving our relationships. Not that we have bad relationships, but we are bolstering our relationships with faculty members across campus. In the writing program, for instance, just these open lines of communication have encouraged professors in the writing program to actually reach out to athletic coordinators and ask questions about athletes, to ask questions about travel time, to ask questions about testing accommodations. And so we have these open lines of communication with the writing program that maybe existed before, but not to the extent that they exist now.
Yeah, so I think both of these programs, we're trying to become more proactive and less reactive in meeting student needs, just because we spent so much time reacting to everything. And now that we have a little bit of, space, we can start to think ahead on how we can, anticipate student needs and then maybe help them from the start of the semester through things like supplemental instruction, through things like the mentoring program. So that way, their schedules are already set, their time is already managed as well as they can make it, so that we can avoid these kinds of anxieties and stressors that become these inhibitors to a positive experience, their education and their athletic performance.
So
We got some questions.
yes, we do have some questions. That's awesome. Before we jump into those specific ones too, yeah, we are planning on adapting this in the Google Doc. There's this form, about how we're going to change it, what we plan on doing in the future. For me, for instance, I really want to expand this supplementary instruction program to maybe about 5 sessions, and then I can maybe oversee that and meet with the coordinators from week to week. That's one way that we want to take that and bring it into the future semesters. But your program might already have mentoring, might already have tutoring, might already have something like these workshops, or you might have 2 and not the other one. And so what we want this workshop to be too is a way to see what your program offers right now, and then steps that you can take if you wanted to incorporate something or shift something, because we are thinking about those same exact things for our programs.
Yeah, and to Layne's point, the person who led, so we started a workshop with geology. Tulsa requires block classes, and one of the blocks is hard science, and the most popular hard science class is geology, just because it's based on scheduling, and studying rocks is an easier sell than like chemistry and medicine or physics, at least for us and our student athletes. So we had a tutor here who got his undergraduate degree in anthropology and double majored in geology, and his name's Logan, and I got to know him as the tutor coordinator. And when he became a graduate student here, I approached him with this idea, and not only was he enthusiastic about it, he was also able to introduce me to the teacher of the course. So we got him on board too, and now we have access to that course material as well. And that kind of course doesn't really change a whole lot from semester to semester. So like future ideas is that maybe we can petition to get another graduate student or 2 from certain departments, and then they can lead supplemental instruction sessions for us as well.
That first question, yeah, supplementary instruction offered. Thank you for these questions, by the way. Is it offered only offered to student athletes? And if so, were there any compliance considerations? So to answer the first part of the question, yes, it is only offered to student athletes through our offices. And as far as the compliance considerations, I think that it kind of falls in line with the other services that we already offer, tutoring, mentoring, etc., which have to do with just kind of leveling the playing field concerning, our athletes have all these expectations and needs that other students don't have. And so we are just trying to understand that situation and bring them to the same level the same level of aptitude as a student that maybe doesn't have all of these expectations and requirements, like their training and practice schedules.
Yeah, and Dorothy, that's a really good question. It's something that we did talk about, because I mean, we're not experts in compliance and Chapter 14 and all those other things. But our general rule of thumb is not to offer or convey any benefit to student athletes that isn't conveyed to the general student population. And that's why we're careful on the way we present this service and also the way we structure it, and that we are supplementing the instruction that's delivered to the class, and we're not actually teaching an alternative class. And we also don't really require these students to go. Now, they are heavily encouraged, especially a few of them, by their academic coordinators and sometimes by the teachers themselves once we develop that relationship and they know that we are providing this service. But we did talk with our compliance staff about it, and they were fine with it. And we've even had, since we started, a biology professor who runs the biology labs for our standard biology courses has offered to come over here and potentially lead workshops for us starting next year. So in that case, we would probably open it up to all students, because that is led by a faculty member and not by a full-time staff member here. But it's another thing that we're considering.
Yeah, and there are walk-in tutoring, resources for all students across campus as well. Yeah. Is there pushback with the time requirements for meeting with mentor academic coordinator? Are coaches supportive of the requirement based on the initial parameters of GPA, etc.?
That's a really great question, Katie. I guess it depends on the coach. So we recently had some turnover in our coaching staff. We have a new rowing coach this year. We have a new-ish women's soccer coach who was promoted from interim. But the big change is that we have a new men's basketball coach this year. This is the second year for a women's basketball coach. And then we have a new football coach as of January. So because of that, there has been some tension, I'm not going to lie, between our academic expectations and requirements and what we think is best for student athletes in terms of their academics or even just time management, and what the coaching staff thinks. So we have butted heads a little bit. Generally speaking, we're all on the same page. You know, either the coaching staff wants their students to be academically eligible, and we want them to, you know, succeed academically and also athletically, of course. But yeah, I mean, to that point, we have access to practice schedules and lift schedules and things like that. Right now, it's a little jumbled, but we're moving to Teamworks. I don't know if anyone here uses Teamworks, but I'm hoping that that leads to a little more synergy and you know, collaboration among the coaches, lift times, you know, academic advising appointments, things like that. And generally speaking, the coaches had no input whatsoever in the Shape Up program. That was something that I came up with, and then we talked about among the, like, to the coaches, and we have a weekly coaches meeting, and we also have a senior staff meeting. That's something that we talked about with them. But basically, the coaches were just concerned that a lot of their students and a lot of their athletes were becoming ineligible, and that they weren't doing well, even if they were allowed to compete. So they just wanted something done. They just didn't know what to do. And we wanted to do something, and we didn't really know what to do either. So we just kind of like started that, and then told the coaches what we were doing, and they seemed generally supportive of it, and have even asked, especially our football coaching staff, have asked some of their students to enroll in the program so we can help them with stuff like time management.
Next question here. Do you folks align and work with the Kansas City SI? Or is this kind of a hybrid creation? Either way, it sounds awesome. Thank you, Kyle. I actually have not heard of the Kansas City SI. I assume that's supplementary instruction. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't, but it's like 4 hours down the road. So I like this kind of Midwest connection.
Yeah. If you can tell me more information about it or send a link to it, and I'll definitely take note of it too. I'm going to write it down here because I will investigate. We were not inspired by that, but it sounds like other people are doing similar things. So this is a kind of a hybrid creation. The second part of your question.
Yeah, Layne didn't really touch on kind of like the genesis of the supplemental instruction session, but really it came about because he was a tutor for us and a grad student, and we had a lot of students that were failing this class, Intro to Media Studies. And there were a bunch of reasons for that. The teacher of the class is also the department chair, and he hasn't taught the class in a couple years, but he had to teach it because of staffing issues in that department. And he went very heavy on theory, and a lot of first-year students were taking the class and were just totally overwhelmed. So like for me as a tutor coordinator, I had about 8 or 9 requests for that class to fill tutoring slots, and we just didn't have the capacity. I think on a good day, we have about 30 tutors that serve our student athletes. I'd like to double that, but you know, like I said, our undergraduate population is pretty low, so it's a tough road to hoe. So we kind of like used Layne, and that became his weekly. He was a graduate student, so we created an award for him, and that became his weekly or monthly stipend, was to lead the supplemental instruction session. And that's kind of how it all came about.
Yeah, just wanted to continue doing that as when I was full time here. And we are just about at the end of the time. We have that Google Doc. Let me look at it here. You can print this off. These, again, this is our mentoring form, so you can kind of see what we're talking about as far as what we lead students through from week to week. I filled out this first sheet about, us moving our program forward with using this mentor form here. The second one I kind of framed with some questions that if you wanted to implement something like this, or if you already do, to kind of adjust it, you can print that, save that, whatever. The link is available. And yeah, I appreciate the questions that you've thrown out in the chat.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and put our email addresses. I think they're in the program, but we'll put them in the chat right now, just so you have access to them. I'll post the link.
Yep. Here's the link again. I see a lot of people highlighting that, saving it, etc. That's great.
Yeah, so I'm going to put my email address. Multitasking's hard for me, so I'm going to pause while I type.
Is it just Habig at Tulsa?
Yeah. Okay. That's cool, huh?
Yeah. I'll put mine in there.
Yeah, so please feel free to reach out about any programs that you all are running, or any like ways to improve these kinds of things. I think moving forward, one thing I want to do is keep building the legacy mentor program and keep recruiting former student athletes to come back. Tulsa is a weird space because like it's a small city, but it's also kind of a big city, and it sucks you in. So we have a lot of student athletes who graduate here. They're not from here, they leave, then they come back. So we're trying to build a community of mentors that can help serve our student athlete needs, that have that experience, that look like them, that's, are from those certain areas. And that way we can kind of like forge those connections. So that's one area. And another area is just to kind of like keep getting more. I'm expanding the mentor program to include all first-year student athletes starting this summer. We have the capacity to do that in the summer, and I think we're going to have that capacity in the spring as well. And then one last thing, and I promise I'll be quiet after this, is I'm working with the graduate school to figure out how to create an award. So like I have a tutor budget that I can use that's separate from, you know, like our administrative budget or office budget or whatever, like salary budget. And the tutor mentor budget has a limit, of course, but it's a little, there's a little more room in there. So I'm creating graduate student awards out of that budget, and TU allows any graduate assistant to work up to 5 hours outside of their original contract. So I'm trying to work with these departments to get someone that, say, is here studying mechanical engineering to come here and maybe lead a supplementary instruction program in the mechanical engineering class, and just keep growing that program. And then that could be their award. I mean, it takes 5 hours a week to kind of design and lead those kinds of things, and provide that service to students. And really, it's a way, as Layne mentioned, to kind of like tutor 10 students at once. And then also build that relationship with faculty and just keep growing this kind of, you know, collaborative environment, because we're all in it together, right? Like we want to see our students do well.
And that's it for us. Thank you so much for attending. I think the moderator is going to jump on here with a QR code.
All right, thanks everyone.
Is the Google Doc link in the presentation?
No, not yet. I was able to get him on.
Let me get that Google Doc link then. Okay. Oh, his microphone is not on.
Yeah, it's intentional. Okay, whenever you're ready, I guess.